Right. There are several components in a bill that we're currently working on that I really desperately hope is going to get voted on sometime later today that will provide direct assistance to families and workers and unemployed people. First and foremost, checks that will go out to every single taxpayer who makes under $75,000, every married couple making under $150,000, and that's in the amount of $1,200 for an individual, $2,400 for a married couple, and then $500 for each child. So those would just be in the form of sort of direct cash assistance going out right away. And then there's a provision that was included in the bill on unemployment insurance that's run through the states. And whatever the state pays an unemployed individual through their state unemployment insurance would be plussed up by $600 per person per week for the next 3 months. And so that would significantly increase the amount of dollars going out there for people who have lost their jobs as a result of the coronavirus crisis. And then a third component of the bill would extend loans to small businesses that would be 100% guaranteed, in other words, forgivable, if those loans were used to keep people employed. In other words, to keep paying their employees even while they may have furloughed them or they're not operating at the current time. And so we're really have an eye in this whole thing toward trying to ensure that people out there who are suffering economically as a result of this are sort of kept afloat until we get to some better times. And then of course there's a big piece in there that deals with the frontline healthcare professionals who are day in and day out risking their lives to help take care of people who are affected by the virus. And that's to the tune of about $250 million. So a lot in there for individuals, families, unemployed, healthcare providers. And then there is a provision in there that would allow businesses to get loans through the Federal Reserve. It's administered by the Treasury, but most of it would be operated through the Federal Reserve to keep their businesses going too. And so it's about a 1.8, 1.9, continues to seem to grow by the day, but $1 trillion proposal that hopefully will ultimately get passed in the Senate and then off to the House. And I think the House, I hope at least the House will wave it through and we can get it on the President's desk.
Yeah. Your speech, I watched your speech last night on the Senate floor.
The country is burning. The country is burning, and your side wants to play political games. And they all hire millions of employees in this country. So yes, we probably need to do something.
You seemed pretty frustrated. Is that politics or is that genuine frustration from you?
Well, it's frustration for me because I've been associated with this process for some time. You know, we started 9 days ago with an outline on this, sort of socialized it with our members, came up with a proposal, had the Democrats join the table in the form of working groups. We had like 5 different working groups who spent several days trying to refine it, take ideas from both sides, incorporate them, and we were ready to move on it, at least to get on the bill, which a vote that would have occurred Sunday morning, and the Democrats blocked us from even proceeding to the bill. And then they did it again yesterday, blocked us again yesterday, and I think yesterday was where I sort of finally had it. But that's really a genuine frustration grounded in what I see happening across South Dakota and across the country, and that is just tremendous disruption in people's lives. I mean, small businesses in South Dakota going out of business through no fault of their own, but because they've either been forced out, told they can't operate, or just have nobody coming in because of everybody's social distancing. And individuals and families who are uncertain and fearful not only about their health, but about their economic well-being. And we just don't have the luxury of time to sit around here and debate things that are totally unrelated to the crisis. And that's what the Democrats had interjected into the discussion, were a lot of unrelated issues that Congress can deal with another time, but have nothing to do with the crisis at hand. And this really ought to be about taking care of people now. And we just, every day that we lose, there are more and more people who are being dislocated, more and more people are being unemployed, and more fear across the country. And so I was expressing that, and I think a lot of members were expressing the same sorts of feelings.
Yeah, I want to get more into the discussion about the bill. I do want to ask you if you've had any interactions with Senator Rand Paul.
I've seen, like all of us, the Senate's a place where you're going by people all the time. I've seen him in the last week too, like other members have, but not in a way that I talked to my physician in South Dakota about those interactions, and obviously we want to take full precautions. But most of us here, I think, right now realize that we've got to get this done, and that's why we're trying. That's another reason we're trying to accelerate and push this process forward. Is who knows when the next senator might come down with something, and we have several of our members already who are self-quarantined, who did spend a lot of time interacting at a very close and personal proximity-wise with Senator Paul. So that's why I think there's added urgency. You got the urgency of what's going on in the country, but you also have a concern about if the Senate, this continues to happen, whether or not we would be able to function effectively. So I want to get this done, get it done now, and get people back to where they can, socially distance and, if necessary, self-quarantine.
I recall talking to you, I think when President Obama came to Watertown, you were saying while we were waiting for Air Force One to come that the Senate doesn't have electronic voting. And I'm wondering, for continuity of government, having Congress continue forward, it is tight quarters on the chamber and more so on the House. How do you address that? Is there a plan to possibly get something to do remote voting, as members start self-quarantining? I heard Senator Rounds is going to self-isolate. Right. Are there plans to do that, and how does Congress continue to function?
Yeah, we've got to have continuity of government. We've got to be able to respond to crisis. And so what we will do, if we can get this current bill behind us, is we will break temporarily. We'll be in session, pro forma session. There'll be probably a couple of members here if something needed to be done. But obviously back subject to the call of the leader. And we've been discussing what we can do. There is no provision for remote voting. There hasn't been in the Senate and the House either, for that matter. But I think everybody's trying to figure out how to stay connected remotely, and then ultimately, if necessary, to come back for votes, to do it in a way that doesn't expose people to the potential of risk and harm. And I think one way that we can do that, and we're doing it right now, is normally we have 15-minute roll call votes in the Senate. We've extended it to 30. We have asked people when they come into the chamber to vote and leave right away. We've dispensed with having any kind of caucus meeting, so we're all kind of, when we do have conversations, and I have them on the floor, but at a distance, and obviously a lot now more by phone, electronically. And so we're looking into how best to do that, knowing full well that there may be ongoing needs with respect to this particular crisis that would require Congress to respond, and we need to make sure that we're available to do that. So those are discussions that we're having, but as of right now, we're trying to do everything we can to keep people apart so that we don't have any further members who are infected with the virus. Right.
I know you have limited time, or I would imagine you would. I just have a few more questions about the actual deal.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
You bet.
So CBS News is reporting overnight the Minority Leader and Treasury Secretary had late-night negotiations. I would imagine, being the whip, you are pretty on the ball of when we could possibly see a deal and what could be happening. So what's your expectation? Do you see something passing soon? Even making this interview out of date.
Well, I hope this interview is out of date for the sake of the country, Michael, but I think that most likely they are very close, and they are meeting right now. Mnuchin is in, and several other members of the President's team, and so we've been dialed into that on a regular basis, as well as what's being done, what decisions are being made. When they report something out, we'll have to take it back to our caucus. They'll have to take it back to their caucus, socialize it with changes that were made. I think for most of our members, if it doesn't deviate too far from what we've been discussing, I don't think we'll have any problems with our folks getting them to support it, because most of our members were pretty comfortable with what was in the bill previously. If the Democrats are satisfied, then it's writing it up, and they're in the process of writing it up already, which takes a while. But you've got to execute on the vote, getting all the paperwork done, and going through the procedural hurdles, which hopefully, won't be a problem. I could envision a scenario where we're voting sometime later today, either in the afternoon or later into the evening, which I hope is the case, because like I said, every day that gets wasted here is one less day that the American people have to get their lives at least somewhat back to normal, or at least to have some confidence that there will be normalcy at some point in the future. And that's why I just think we have to get this done. So my hope is they get the deal, we figure out if we have the votes to pass it, they get it written up, and we can execute on the procedural process that we have to go through here in the Senate to get it done. And then it's got to go through the House, obviously. And I think Speaker Pelosi has indicated, if it's acceptable, that she would try and do it by unanimous consent, which takes the consent of all the members. If they don't get unanimous consent, then the House has to come back in, and that's problematic and slow and unwieldy and everything else. So I hope they can wave it through in the House, send it to the President, and get this assistance on its way out to the American people.
I have two more questions for you. Here in South Dakota, from what we're seeing, it appears that there is the governor and mayor is trying to balance the needs of businesses and public health. Projections are that South Dakota won't peak until May or June from the state. What is your best advice for state and local officials as they try to grapple with the situation of how to handle it?
I think you have to listen to the healthcare professionals, and we've got good ones in South Dakota, and then just look at the data. I mean, you can the data in South Dakota is going to be different probably than it is in New York or California or Washington or places like that, but you've got to have good data, good analytics, and evidence and science to make those decisions. And so, you know, I mean, those are hard decisions to make, because I know there are a lot of folks that are impacted no matter what they do. But the governor and the mayor, and I've spoken with both of them, are grappling with wanting to do the right thing, but most importantly wanting to protect people. And I think that's where they're coming down, obviously. And so some of the decisions that they're in the process of having to make right now, I think will be guided and shaped by what we see in terms of the data, and as it continues to come in, and look at cases and where they are and how it's being spread, and what needs to be done to prevent it from spreading any further. We just got to stay on top of this, and that's why social distancing and people taking responsibility for themselves and their families is really important right now. I just can't emphasize enough that this stuff really does matter if we want to stop the spread of this thing.
Lastly, are you satisfied with the President's response to this?
You know, the President, I think, is assembled the right team. He's got really talented people. Dr. Birx, Dr. Fauci, I think, provide really good counsel. They're very trusted by people across this country. And so I think, you know, one of the keys of leadership is getting the right people around you and letting them make the decisions. And I hope that he'll continue to make decisions that are guided by their input. And obviously they've got a task force that's meeting on a regular basis that's trying to make decisions too about how to deal with the national crisis that's unfolding in front of us. And so it's evolving by the day, but I just would urge the President to listen very carefully to the experts he has around him and the people who are not only familiar with but continue to study what's happening globally and the potential impacts that could have for our country.